After days of tense dialogue with Italy, France will offer a safe port for more than 200 migrants on board the Ocean Viking rescue ship. As the talks continue at the COP27 in Egypt, side events are discussing how big tech can play a role at the climate negotiating table. France will allow the Ocean Viking rescue ship carrying more than 200 migrants to dock in Toulon, following tense exchanges with Italy over the vessel's fate. 4 people have had to be evacuated from the boat to a hospital, as France's Interior Minister calls Rome's decision to turn away the boat incomprehensible and selfish.
Every additional hour at sea now puts the lives of some of its passengers at great risk. The new Italian authorities made the incomprehensible decision not to respond to the many requests for assistance made by the ship over the last few days, even though it was without any possible dispute in the Italian search and rescue zone.
The
NGO behind the vessel says there was a mixed feeling of relief and anger at the news of a designated safe port because there are still other ships stranded at sea. In the meantime, Italy's government has backed down on its stance and allowed hundreds of rescued migrants to leave 3 other NGO vessels, and not just those who were deemed vulnerable.
The Battle of Kherson is not over, but Russian forces have entered a new phase, prioritizing withdrawing their forces across the river in good order and delaying Ukrainian forces rather than seeking to hold the Ukrainian counteroffensive entirely, says the Institute for the Study of War. The Ukrainian counteroffensive in the Kherson direction since August, a coordinated interdiction campaign to force Russian forces to withdraw across Dnipro without necessitating major Ukrainian ground offensives, has likely succeeded. As the Institute for the Study of War has observed over the past few months, Ukrainian forces engaged in a purposeful and well-executed campaign to target Russian concentration areas, military assets, logistics nodes throughout Kherson region and bridges across the Dnipro River. The UK Defence Ministry says with limited crossing points, Russian forces will be vulnerable in crossing Dnipro. It is likely that the withdrawal will take place over several days, with defensive positions and artillery fires covering withdrawing forces. The Institute for the Study of War says the Russian withdrawal from the west bank of Dnipro is unlikely to be a trap meant to lure Ukrainian troops into costly combat near Kherson city, as some Ukrainian and Western sources have suggested. The think tank has previously observed many indicators that Russian forces have steadily withdrawn from west bank across Dnipro River. Russian commanders will certainly attempt to slow Ukrainian advances to maintain an orderly withdrawal, and some forces may remain to delay Ukrainian troops in Kherson city itself, but this fighting will be a means to the end of withdrawing as many Russian units as possible in good order under Ukrainian pressure. Commander of the Russian Armed Forces in Ukraine, Army General Sergei Surovikin, notably stated that half of the troops withdrawn from the west bank of Dnipro will be redeployed to other areas of Ukraine. But the loss of Kherson West Bank will likely prevent Russia from achieving its strategic aspiration of land bridge reaching Odessa.
As the political negotiations continue at the COP27 in Egypt, side events are taking place on various projects and initiatives. These meetings are meant to discuss and analyze technological developments. The Swiss company Climeworks has developed a way to extract CO2 from the atmosphere.
It's become more and more clear that in order to reach the temperature goals set in Paris, we have to do 2 things. First being massive emission reductions on an unprecedented scale. But in addition to that, we also need to be employing large-scale technologies that can remove CO2 from the atmosphere.
These parallel discussions are also an opportunity to examine the pros and the cons of certain proposed solutions. For example, planting trees is key to fighting climate change, but experts say it needs to be part of a broader approach.
Planting trees, of course, can be a solution from a market perspective, also from an ecosystem perspective. But as much as planting trees could be one of the solutions, the other solutions relate to conservation, forest conservation, keep the ecosystems as they are and maintain them over time. Restoration, of course. We need to restore and make sure that degraded forests become efficient, not only from a productive point of view, but also from an ecosystem and an ecological point of view and social point of view.
Although these events do not directly influence the negotiations between governments and institutions, they do, however, contribute to the climate debate that intersects politics, civil society and industry.
The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said the EU will increase financial support to Moldova in the face of an acute energy crisis. On a visit to the country, von der Leyen told President Maia Sandu that Brussels will provide an additional €200 million for the country's energy security. She added the bloc will also pledge a further €50 million for general budget support. According to the news agency TASS, a Russian consumer watchdog reveals the sale of antidepressants sold this year increased by 70% compared to the same period last year. This is confirmed by psychologists who see a spike in Russians taking the invasion of Ukraine and mobilization hard.
For 2 months earlier this year, I didn't leave my house. I had no energy to do anything. Not even energy, but the desire to do anything. As if you stopped seeing any point in it at all.
In a press release by the watchdog, it remarked that the increase in sales could be down to two factors: unemployment caused by the withdrawal of companies from the Russian market and the increased anxiety among the population.
Antidepressants are released only on prescription, so the increase in their sales reflects that the number of patients taking antidepressants has actually increased. I think that this is largely due to the anxiety that has arisen in connection with recent events.
Polls have not recorded any major changes in Russian sentiment after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. According to the Levada Center, a temporary surge of irritation was only noticeable after the announcement of mobilization. But even in October, almost two-thirds of respondents assessed their mood as normal or fine.
What should be the fate of these monuments glorifying the Soviet regime located in Latvia? That's the big debate currently gripping this Baltic country. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Latvia has adopted laws to dismantle these Soviet monuments. But memorials and graveyards containing human remains or considered to be cultural landmarks remain protected. The city of Daugavpils has multiple Soviet landmarks and also a sizable ethnic Russian community. For many Russian speakers, tearing down these monuments equates to rewriting history.
A soldier is a soldier. The war set things clear. What happened, happened. The monument was built in gratitude to someone. If we go back in history, whose territory this was, there may be a lot of debates. We could talk about it endlessly. In my opinion, by taking down the monuments, we erase history.
Things are very different in Riga, the country's capital. Here, local authorities have not hesitated to dismantle the remaining Soviet monuments.
This massive obelisk commemorating the Soviet army's victory over the Nazis became a contentious spot in the capital before being torn down. Authorities claim that the memorial turned into a meeting ground for those pining for Latvia's Soviet past, as well as Russian war sympathizers. And Riga doesn't want any more symbols of totalitarianism, especially following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, according to the city's mayor.
The first idea, yes, was to rename it or give them a different meaning. But what happened after this initiative, the people were starting to donating to take this monument down. And these donations covered all the expenses to demolish.
Some landmarks considered important could end up here at the Museum of the Occupation of Latvia. There, these historic artifacts will be preserved and exhibited, a reminder of a traumatic chapter in Latvia's history.